Thank you for joining us again on this Thursday of Holy Week. So from this point forward, Thursday and Friday's video, they're going to be a little bit longer just because they're a little more intense. There's a little more that's going on. A lot's going on in these couple days. So sort of bear with us as we go through these times. There'll be a couple more songs in these videos as well. But Thursday of Holy Week is Passover, right? So in Matthew chapter 26, 17 through 19, preparations for Passover are being made. Jesus sends his disciples out to prepare for Passover, to get the things needed for Passover, to get the location for Passover, all these things. An interesting thing happens during this Passover specifically that doesn't necessarily happen in other Passovers. And that's where I want to start our reading this morning, or this Thursday. And we're going to be in John chapter 13 for this reading. We're going to read verses 1 through 20 of John chapter 13. It says this: Now before the feast of Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour had come to depart out of this world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. During the supper, when the devil had already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. So this beginning piece says Jesus knows what's going to happen. Jesus knows what's already happened yesterday, Wednesday of Holy Week. Jesus knows that Judas has already betrayed him. Jesus also knows, that will come later actually, but Jesus also knows that Peter is going to deny him. And knowing all of these things, this next event takes place. Verse 4. Rose from supper, he laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, do you wash my feet? Jesus answered him, What I am doing you do not understand now, but afterward you will understand. Peter said to him, You shall never wash my feet. Jesus answered him, If I do not wash you, you have no share with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Jesus said to him, The one who has bathed does not need to wash except for his feet, but is completely clean. And you are clean, but not every one of you. For he knew who was to betray him. That was why he said, Not all of you are clean. I'm going to stop my reading there actually and not go to verse 20. But Jesus washes the disciples' feet on Thursday of Holy Week before Passover begins. Turning back to Matthew 26, the Lord also institutes the Lord's Supper. He gives instructions on how to do this, and this is what we still do today. It says this in verse 26 of chapter 26. Now, as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it, broke it, and gave it to the disciples, and said, Take, eat, this is my body. And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, Drink it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins. I tell you, I will not drink again of this fruit from the vine until the day when I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom. So Jesus, on Thursday of Holy Week, Passover occurs. And the washing of the disciples' feet occurs. And these two things, I imagine, were great times. Were some of the best times that Jesus had with the disciples. And then they leave the place where they were having Passover. And this is where Tenebrae happens, or Tenebrae service. And that means a service of shadows. And it's called that because these next events that are going to happen up until the burial of Christ are events that are difficult. They're known as shadows because emotionally they get darker and darker and darker. And that's generally how a Tenebrae service would run. So for our next few readings for today and for tomorrow, for Friday, Good Friday, we're going to read these as a Tenebrae service would be generally read. That's where I'm getting these from. So Matthew 26, verse 47 through 56 says this. While he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayal had given them a sign, saying, "The one I kiss is the man. Seize him." And he came up to Jesus at once and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you came to do." Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. And behold, one of those who were with Jesus stretched out his hand and drew his sword and struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legion of angels? But how then should the scriptures be fulfilled that I must do so?" At that hour Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out as a robber, with swords and clubs to capture me? Day after day I sat in the temple, teaching, and you did not seize me. But all this has taken place that the scriptures of the prophets might be fulfilled." Then all the disciples left him and fled.